Quit talking.
That's right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, be with us this evening as we do the business for the city and the community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Item C, approval of agendas. This is the approved agenda for July 14th, 2025, regular planning commission meeting.
I'll move to approve the agenda for July 14, 2025. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. This is item D, citizens' comments. At this point, we allow anybody who wants to speak, and they're allowed 3 minutes. They must state their first and last name and where they reside. And at this point, Mr. Chair, if you want, you can open citizens' comments.
All right, we'll open citizens' comments.
Very good. Anybody want to speak on that? First and last name, where you live, any type of political affiliations?
Let's see, at Panera, I'm Fernando Santana, but here I'm George Lee, I'm the mayor of the city of Goddard. And I just want to make a shameless plug for the fundraiser that we're doing for the senior van. Earlier this year, we received a grant for, I think it's $75,000 or $80,000 for a senior van. It's a 15-passenger van. Also, in that grant is an additional $10,000 for maintenance, ongoing maintenance of vans. So there's a match for this, which is around $20,000. So I thought it'd be fun if we could just put together a little fundraiser and see what support we can get from the community and also from the seniors. So I was next door a few minutes ago and they're doing line dancing, and I just told them and proved that I have 2 left feet. But I did hand out a few of these cards, and I left you each one. It's got a QR code on it, and hopefully we can raise, $15,000, $20,000 for the down payment. I pitched it as 100 people doing looking for 100 people, 20 doing 400, 20 300, 20 200, 2100, 20 doing 50. That'd be 20 and $1,000. But I've already had somebody give me $1.50 in pennies, so we'll do pennies for progress as well. The idea, though, I think, is to try to encourage the seniors and also give opportunity to the members of the community to show their support for the senior center. So just wanted to drop these off and just would say thank you, appreciate anything that you'd be willing to do. I did the first contribution. I kicked $400 in. I don't like asking people to do anything that I want to do myself. So anyway, we only need 199 folks to reach that number, so we're getting at those increments. But however it comes in, and we're thankful for every dollar, every donation we get. Appreciate you guys' work that you do for our community. We're blessed to have you share your time, your energy, your talents. I just want to say thank you too. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll close citizens' comments.
Very good. So item E, consent agenda. So this is to approve the minutes from June 9th, 2025, regular planning commission meeting. As a reminder, we had the R1 zoning lot width and depth modification, the Garber presentation for Garber Trails and Phase 2 concept, and then the salt sand building for the public works site plan.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. This is item F, Board of Zoning Appeals. This is F1. So this is the setback reduction, lot coverage, heightened permitted uses for the R1 amendment. We will also have the G1, which will cover lot width and lot depth. So from time to time, it is considered good practice to review the subdivision zoning regulations to determine if any modification or adoption should be made. City staff presented the possibility of modifying the R1 zoning classification to allow smaller lots with smaller lot widths and depths. Planning Commission stated that they would like to see what this would look like holistically with all the bulk regulations together. This is part of that request to show a theoretical home on modified regulations and what we call the buildable envelope would look like. Second part of the change comes with permitted uses. It's often the case that land is donated to the city for city uses for additional public buildings. We get a lot of land donated to us so people can have tax write-offs. This land is typically R1 since the majority of land in the city limits is zoned R1, and so the zoning classification only allows public buildings as a special use, and city staff would like to change that to allow public buildings as an R1 district as an acceptable use. So, and then we're going to go through. Black is not changing. Green I've added. Red I'm striking out. And so you guys can look at this, and if you see anything you don't like, or see anything you do like, or have any questions or comments, just feel free to state it. All your comments will be received and filed, and we'll present it to the City Council for final consideration. So, under permitted uses, you can see here I marked green, which is a public building erected or land used by any agency of the city or township, county, or state government not otherwise provided for in these regulations. And under special uses, you see here was number 1 was public buildings erected or land used by any agency of the city or township, county, or state government not otherwise provided for in these regulations. So I moved this one to here, so it became a permitted use from a special use. And as mentioned, we need a lot of land. That's one of the reasons. We can think about what that would look like. The only real maybe concern we might have about that, if it was more of a water treatment plant, maybe next to residential, that might be some kind of issue, but obviously we already have that. We have a water treatment plant right next to Cloverleaf development, so it's literally abutting a residential development. And if you think about the fact that public and private schools are already considered an acceptable use, there's nothing that's going to have a higher traffic volume than that compared to the city. So ultimately, I don't see a real strong reason for why that would be considered a negative to have a public building. I mean, it's not abnormal for you to see a police office or a police building next in a residential neighborhood. So, but that's just being said, we've decided to move it from 1 and 2 permitted uses. So that was change number 1. Conditional uses are not changing. Lot size requirements, so dwellings permitted under section 4101A1, which is basically all the permitted uses, which includes single family. And you notice here, single family detached and residential design manufactured homes, it doesn't allow for 2 family, it's only allowed, 2 families only allowed as a conditional use. So this is just talking about single families and modular homes. We switched it from 6,000 to 4,000, and that's to accommodate a 40-foot width and then 100-foot for the depth. So that would be 4,000 right there. And then dwellings permitted by section 4101 for minimum lot width, we're doing 40 feet. And next. There it goes. We did change the maximum structure height from 35 to 45 feet. I don't really see them changing that much, but I figured if you shrank it a little bit, maybe you want to go more vertical, that would give you a little bit more wiggle room to go from 35 to 45. That would give you opportunity if you wanted to build vertically, because our lot coverage really only takes into account the building footprint. Some cities, as I mentioned before, has what's called an FAR, or floor area ratio, and then you would count in your numerator, you would count floor number 1, floor number 2, floor number 3, to floor number 4. We don't do that. We just say building footprint is your numerator and your denominator is your lot. And so for here, you could have 2,000 and then go vertical. So our cap is 45 feet on that one. Minimum front yard, 20 feet. So we just reduced it from 25 to 20. And then I changed it here where it says where the street right-of-way is at least 60 feet wide. Since some of our streets are shrinking, this still should take into account the fact that the streets are shrinking and still allow that. One of the yards may be reduced to 15 feet, provided that the driveway to a parking space must retain a length of at least 20 feet from the front from the front lot line. So this is what you see when it says from 15 to 20 here. That's on every corner lot you see in every subdivision around here. So every time you turn a corner, you'll see a house set back 20 feet, but then instead of it being 6 feet to the side, you'll see it pushed over 15. So there's always that reduction possibility. Minimum side yard, that hasn't really changed. Dwellings permitted by section 4101 for minimum side yard, we had it at 6. We marked it down to 2.5, and that's to kind of allow for that closer 2.5 on one side and 2.5 on the other. This is still not zero lot line, so you still can't put a building directly on the lot line, but we would allow 2.5 for that 5-foot causeway, breedway that we see, and some of the concepts that we're coming up with, or some of the concepts the developers are coming up with. Minimum rear yard would be 11.5, so I dropped it from 20 to 11.5. The reason I put 11.5, you'll see an example of this actually in Wichita. The reason I did 11.5 is because typically you'll have an easement in the backyard, and it's 10 feet on one person's side of the property and 10 feet on the other. So add an extra 1.5 to stay out of the easement would actually give Public Works a better opportunity to reach inside and get that water line or sewer line if they need to do a repair. They'll just give them an extra 1.5. Minimum lot coverage. So instead of doing 35 or 50 or 60, I just decided that it's best to simply say a building may occupy all the lot not required by the setbacks with the use limitations. And so that being said, use limitations should have been pushed down to here with no outdoor storage. That should have been green. That's staying black. Use limitations is no outdoor storage. But basically we're saying instead of trying to do a calculation of like how much is sitting on the lot versus the lot and saying that, well, it's 35 or 25 or 15 or 60, we'll simply say, well, you've met all the setback requirements, so you can occupy all of that lot that's not required by setbacks. Once again, that's part of your buildable envelope. So So what does that look like? That looks like this. So you would have 40 by 100. You have 11.5 for the rear yard setback, 2.5 on the sides, 20 on the front, and then that would leave you about 2,240 available space to build. This is what you call your buildable envelope, is the blue part, with the yellow being the restriction. So I actually found not an exact example of this, but I found this one over in Auburn Lakes. That's off of 135th and north of US 54 on the east side. This is a little blurry over here, but you can see it. They have 48 as the width. So it's actually really interesting that they did 48. And then they have, I call these piano key lots, and you can see why. They're like piano keys, but they have 48 here, and it goes back about 150, 160, 120. So they made them really long in the back to give them more backyard space, but they made the width 48. And you can see here that's about a 5-foot width. So they actually have them separated about 5 feet between these two buildings. And then they did gravel concept. So what you're seeing is a lot of developers will, this is from Perfection Builders, and so what you're seeing is that some developers are saying, hey, this works for them, so maybe it'll work for us. And so you're seeing a replication here. There's a Bible verse that says there's nothing new under the sun. That certainly applies to development. Everybody's just simply copying and pasting out there everybody else. They said, if this works for somebody, it probably can work for me. So this is actually a precedent now. These homes are built in Wichita. It looks like this from an aerial perspective. And so I took this from Auburn Lakes, and I dropped the theoretical lot on there to kind of see what that would look like mocked up. And so you can see that it almost meets exactly the lot width here. Lot depth, they added an extra 50 feet in the back, so that's quite a significant bit more on that end. But as mentioned, these parameters here, these are lot minimums, not lot maximums. So if this was adopted today, they still could build this concept here. But this is kind of what it would look like, and you can see the breezeways that they have in between the lots. So we try to always show now a fiscal impact analysis, what that might look like. This is asphalt, and so what that would look like over 35 years. Table 1 below shows 75 acres with the proposed infrastructure based on averages from previous developments. The total liability over 35 years amounts to about $5.8 million. So assuming 2.5 lots per acre, the development would have about 188 lots, excuse me. If the average home is around $400,000, the city would generate about $4.3 million, so we'd have a net negative balance of about $1.4 million. If we changed it so that it was using 40 by 80, or 40 by 100, then we'd have about maybe 4.125 lots per acre. And 4.125 sounds like a lot, or like really small lots, but if you think about it, 4.125 is actually the Willow development, which is being proposed off 183rd and Maple. So they're actually platted, this is actually platted right now, 4.125 lots per acre. And you would have about 309 lots. If the average home was $250,000, that would generate about $5.5 million. And it would still be net negative, it'd be less than a net negative, we'd be around $306,000 in the hole. But what's interesting is to break even on this concept at 40 foot by 100, average home would have to be about $277,000. So if we had a home that was about $277,000 as an average for a development, it could potentially have a zero-sum gain. There would be no net loss to the city if it was developed that way. Just something to think about. So small publication costs for the public hearing and the ordinance under consideration by the City Council. Legally, it's approved as the form. It is recommended the Planning Commission Chair both one, open the public hearing, receive comments, close the public hearing, and approve the changes to the subdivision regulations amending the R1 zoning regulations. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, if you want to open the public hearing.
All right, let's open the public hearing.
Very good. Are you here to talk about R1 zoning regulations? No? Okay. Mr. Chair, at this point, you can close the public hearing. Unless,
Close the public hearing.
all right, we're closing the public hearing. At this point, it would just be deliberation, comments, thoughts, feedback.
So with no maximum lot coverage restriction, what does that do to the evaluation of drainage?
Drainage? Well, usually drainage is going to be inside of the utility easement. So utility easements double as a drainage easement. So that 11.5 feet would also carry water to the storm inlets. But the storm inlets would be inside of that easement.
But are they going to have to be evaluated for additional, since there's less surface for the water to soak into? Is that,
Potentially. But just because these are the minimum doesn't mean that's actually going to be built out that way. But at the same time, when they do a stormwater evaluation and they do lot grading and master drainage plan, they assume maximum impervious surface when they do calculation. Usually they do maximum, and I'm not an engineer so I can tell you, but usually they do maximum impervious surface runoff as a consideration. They don't go, well, we're gonna do minimum, and hope things don't get built out. They usually say maximum, and then people usually come below that. That's what they use when they're doing for detention pond sizing, to say, well, we're gonna have a lot of impervious surface taken into account, streets, sidewalks, and then the built surface area for those lots. And it's all gonna go into these ponds, so they're gonna size them up accordingly to have zero-sum game. That's a good question.
And what was the setback off the street, 15 feet?
Yeah, so potentially, you got 2.5, but off the side of the street, you could be pushed back 15.
So in other words, strictly one car. You couldn't put 2 cars in that driveway.
You could put 2 cars in the driveway if it took that into account,
I mean,
but,
if you put 2 cars end to end, and one of them will stick out in the street.
well,
And if you got a sidewalk, why put sidewalks and
yes.
you just constantly weaving?
Right, so this is saying that if you have a corner lot, you're probably not gonna be able to get that 40 by 100. You're gonna have to make it slightly bigger to accommodate that. So then you would have the 2 car minimum. That's still a requirement for the parking regulations. So as soon as you hit that corner, you're probably gonna have to go bigger to accommodate for that. Unless you just made that be a reserve area. That's not uncommon where you'll see lots, especially on more linear developments, you'll see them go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then have a reserve. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then another reserve. So you have a common area that spaces them out before they hit the street. And it's ultimately be up to the engineering firm and the developer to lay that out. But to accommodate that, they would probably have to say, we're gonna make a strip of a reserve area to buffer the side lots from the actual street. That's not uncommon. But this still requires Article 5, parking regulations, two off-street parking spots are always going to be a requirement for single-family dwelling units.
Are we gonna require sidewalks?
Sidewalks we could. Technically, subdivision regulations require it. The way it states it right now is that the city engineer makes that determination. That's one thing I was going to present to you guys in the future as a change in subdivision regulations is a requirement for sidewalks. Most developers put them in at least on one side of the street. We could consider 6-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street. That increases the specials. If it increases the specials, they're going to want to go smaller on the lots. So, I mean, it's sort of catch-22 there. But I mean, right now the way it's written, it's kind of a determination of the city engineer. But most developments, they put in sidewalk on one side of the street. In Deer Trail right now, in my development that I live in right now, there's no sidewalks in the street. It was built in the 80s, 86, and early 90s, so there's no sidewalks in the street. But they have a common area that you can walk to that's exclusive to the neighborhood. So, yeah, I'm not opposed to making that a requirement. Of course, that just, like I said,
At
increases
least on
specials.
one side of the street would be nice.
Yeah, they usually do. They usually do. But it wouldn't hurt to say, hey, you have to put in 6-foot sidewalks, because sometimes I end up strolling off into the grass to get away, from the person walking the dog, or something of that nature. So that's just another requirement we can change in subdivision regulations. That's a good question.
The 24-inch now?
What's that?
The sidewalk width.
The width right now, they're 4 feet. The width is 4 feet. They're all 4 feet, unless we require otherwise. Yeah.
Well, the house is getting smaller, and I think that encourages people to not be inside them so often. And sidewalks might be nice to have. It's safe to.
Yeah, we certainly could consider that as sort of a basic requirement. We also could float the idea of a basic requirement as a neighborhood park. If people have less backyards, maybe a dedicated common areas becomes a requirement as opposed to a suggestion. Right now, it's not a requirement. It just simply says if you are dedicating any land or lots to neighborhood parks, you have to show it on the plat, but it doesn't say you have to do it. So that's definitely a consideration too. Like if sidewalks and parks should be a requirement. It's like we could just simply say in the subdivision regulations, unless planning commission and city council don't want to see a neighborhood park, it's something to consider.
to be a ways down the road, but if you're talking 40, 45 foot, how does anybody perform maintenance of all those gable ends?
With care,
The ladder's not gonna get there.
sensitive care.
Scaffold,
Sure. Any way people would normally maintain it. There's some houses, well, I haven't actually seen it. Well, I have seen some houses that are pretty tall. I don't know if they're 45 feet, but I pushed it up there just in case. But if you're gonna do maintenance on something that high up, I wonder how high. Well, mine's 2 stories. How tall is a 2-story house? 25, 30?
Yeah, not more than 35.
Yeah, so we're probably not gonna hit that 45-foot threshold, but if we ever did, at least it'd be considered acceptable. But if somebody's gonna do maintenance on it, then they can do it with care, great care, with OSHA in mind, because they're probably listening. I mean, I imagine it'd just be the same way, like we talked about doing maintenance up on a hotel or an apartment complex, something, it's just with great care, sensitivity.
I still think the minimum side yard of 2.5 is not enough. You can go at least 5. Nobody can run roof to roof. Well,
Watch a lot of Marvel
if you
movies
got
that way.
5 foot between the foundations, you got an overhang of what, foot and a half? Not very far jump to run roof to roof.
It's possible.
It's good for the chimney sweeps.
Yeah.
I could probably make that.
Next meeting?
I'll give it a try.
And I'll say for me personally, I mean, 2 things. I'm in favor of it for 2 reasons. One, I mean, this is what we're seeing from developers. This is what they believe the market is moving to. My fundamental assumption is if a developer is going to come and propose something like this, it's because they think it's going to sell. They're not going to throw out a development that they're not doing it just for the fun. They're doing it to make money. If this is what the market's asking for, we need to be sensitive to that. The second thing, you know, as we all know, I mean, housing in general has become very expensive. Building equity in a home is a fundamental building block of our economy. And obviously, the younger you can do that, the better to get that ball rolling. I think houses like this offer that opportunity to those that to get into home ownership as soon as possible, get that equity building up. That's much harder to do today with the housing situation. This offers a product that I think people can start doing that with. Start building some of that equity in their own home to do things with. So I'm in favor of for those 2 reasons.
Well, not to rush anyone, but if there's no comments, we're looking for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the changes to the subdivision regulations amending the Audubon zoning regulations. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll go down the line. Commissioner Hayden,
Aye.
Commissioner Klein,
Opposed?
Chair Coyne,
Yes.
Commissioner Walker,
Yes.
Commissioner Milligan,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
opposed.
Okay, motion passes 4-2. Will now be considered by City Council with that consideration in mind. So, thank you very much. Moving on, this is item F2, parking space minimum amendment. So, from time to time, I like to start off with this first sentence. From time to time, it is considered good practice to review subdivision zoning regulations in terms of any modifications or adoption should be made. Parking space minimums are a topic of conversation in modern day planning when one looks at the space consumed by parking for businesses. parking requirements tend to come from analysis of peak demand usage during the year, and this analysis is used to set minimum number of parking spaces for that land use. So, I've kind of had this conversation with some of you, but you've probably heard it before. It's like the cities will tend to say, well, what is your greatest day of the year, which requires the most amount of cars? And, people say like Black Friday. So we'll say, okay, well, that's going to be the minimum standard for parking moving forward for that particular land use. And so it's kind of it's the abnormal thing to consider, but you say, hey, when you're up here, we want all parking to be up here for all those land uses moving forward. And then of course the businesses are like, that's odd, because the majority of the time my business is not doing a Black Friday sale, so why am I required to have X number of parking? So this comes up quite a bit, and so the question about what should we do, or should we dictate it, or should we not dictate it, and so this is something for Planning Commission to consider along with City Council. So you guys are welcome. So anytime I'm in agony, you're going to be in agony as well. So parking requirements tend to come from that. This tends to lead to empty parking spaces throughout the year, effectively leading to a large swath of undeveloped land and economic potential loss. And so that's something to definitely consider. What this policy revision seeks to do is remove the parking minimums for commercial and industrial uses and apartments, condos, hotels, and motels, not single family or two family, or it's anything over 3, basically. Well, apartments, condos, and hotels and motels. This will allow the developers to determine on a case-by-case basis what a reasonable amount of parking is given their land use, and will potentially allow more buildings to be built on smaller tracts of land, increasing the tax base for the city. All policy revisions are considered first by the Planning Commission, of course, and then second by the City Council for final approval. So, click. Planning Commission is reviewing a policy amendment to remove all parking minimums for certain land uses as well as supplemental provisions. So, a full review of the proposed changes and modifications are listed under Exhibit F.2A. The language provided will allow developers to determine parking based on reasonable expectations. And so what we determine as reasonable expectations is they say, hey, I need to build a building that's X by X, Y feet or whatever, and I need to have a certain amount of parking. I believe that the best parking, given my land use, based on what they know is best given their market, we would like to see X number of parking spaces. So we'll have that dialogue with the developer and say, what do you think is reasonable? And then they'll say, we propose X number of parking spaces. And so, of course, it being a commercial development, that means they're going to put X number of parking spaces on a site plan, and that site plan will come before the Planning Commission. If you go, hey, I feel like that's not enough parking, and you could require more parking during the site plan. If you say, hey, I feel like this is way too much parking, then you could ask them to reduce the amount of parking. And it's just something to be considered. But that way, it won't have to be a calculation that shows up on the site plan. It will just simply be a count. You would see it show up on the site plan as a count. Number of parking will be X. Number of ADA parking spots will be excess. We are not removing the ADA requirement. This will allow developers to build more of their businesses, which will be more valuable to the city long term than parking that accommodates the business. It will also allow the city to have more commercial business placed in a specific area for more revenue to be generated to minimize their infrastructure liability. And what does that look like? That looks like, hopefully if I click this button, there, this is what it looks like. So here's Walmart. And so I pulled this from the county records, and county uses Marshall and Swift to do appraisals and make determinations. So Marshall and Swift will say, hey, you have a Cobra light, it's made out of steel, that's $5,000. You have a chain link fence, it's running for X number of linear feet, that's whatever, $20,000. And so they said, Marshall and Swift said, based on the county website, that the asphalt parking for Walmart is $2.80 per square foot. So it's roughly $800 to $1,000, $360. And they said, well, the Walmart building is a composition of different material, but ultimately it's about $73 per square foot. So that equals about $9.2 million. And so combine those two together, the parking lot, and I'm generalizing this, so I'm not an appraiser. So I'm generalizing this. Total value is about $10 million. Assessed value, since it's commercial, is 25%. So that comes to $2.5 million. So the city is generating $92,995 a year off of the Walmart, that's a good amount of money. That's good for property taxes. But theoretically, what if Walmart could reduce its parking and say they want to introduce an extra 32,000 square feet? Well, what we did is we took 32,000 away from the parking and added it to the building, and so that generated, at $73 per square foot, $11 million. It reduced the 801 to 711,000, but it made the total increase, because obviously 73 per square foot is definitely better than $2.80 per square foot. So now we're generating $119,000 a year. So we're making an extra $20,000 a year just by reducing parking minimums and allowing them to build an extra 32,000 square feet. You can take that even further and say, well, since they don't need all that parking anymore, I can click this button, we can chop this little section out over here and put another building over here. So let's chop out about 60,000 per square foot for paving and add another 30,000 square foot building at $73 per square foot over here and $2.80 over here. This generates an extra $21,000 to the city on top of the $111,000 over here. So now we're getting an extra $40,000 a year difference than what Walmart originally looked like. So this is just a way conceptually to look at it and saying, hey, we can actually add more building to the actual building, and in fact we can chop off little lots if necessary, and you could put in extra buildings that would generate more revenue for the city, because not only would this commercial building potentially be generating property taxes, but it's also going to be generating sales taxes, because if it's a retail business, then that's just our 1% kicks in, and then now we're generating a lot more revenue. Not to mention our 1% from all of the sales taxes from them buying extra material to ship to that new business. So that's one way of looking at it. So, very small publication cost for the public hearing and the ordinance after consideration by City Council. Legally, it's approved as form. It is recommended the Planning Commission have the Planning Commission chair open the public hearing, receive comments, close the public hearing, and approve any changes to approve the changes to subdivision regulations and any article applying to the parking regulations. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, if you want to, you can open the public hearing.
All right, we'll open the public hearing.
Very good. Are you here to talk about now? Okay. Parking? All right, Mr. Chair, at this point, you can close the public hearing.
We'll close the public hearing.
Very good. At this point, it's just deliberation, comments, questions, thoughts, concerns.
Would this apply retroactively to places like Walmart? You know, this passes, could Walmart do exactly what you
Yes.
proposed?
It could. If it's like, well, I don't need as much parking anymore, and I'm not held by the parking regulations, then I'm going to sell a quarter of my lot. And I'm not saying that this is something Wichita already does. I'm not having looked at Wichita, but I did notice a lot of 7 Brews popping up in different parking lots, and I wonder, I'm just wondering about that. 7 Brews, a coffee shop, and you see them pop up in parking lots. And I'm like, how do they do that? You know, how do they do that according to Wichita subdivision regulations? But I don't work for Wichita, so I'm not sure.
Like the one in the Lowe's parking.
Exactly. So it popped up in the Lowe's parking lot, and you're looking at that, and from planning perspective, from you guys too, you're probably like, I wonder how, did they get a variance? What's happening over here right now? Most people just drive by and go, I want coffee, but you guys are looking at it like, I wonder if they got a conditional use permit for that. You know what I mean? So it's, when you see that pop open, you're like, that's 7 Brew, you know, you're like, well, that's more sales taxes to Wichita. Except they don't have 1% sales tax, so, you know, it's just more property taxes then. But that 7 Brew is probably, I don't know, $20 per square foot, I'm not sure. But it's definitely more than $2.80 per square foot, so they're just generating more revenue off the same parking lot. It's just something to think about. But yes, retroactively, they could do that.
I don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the F2 agenda item.
I'll second it.
Who wants that one? Okay, very good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
opposed?
Any opposition on that particular one? Okay, 6-0 on that one. Thank you very much. This is F3, C1 parking lot requirement removal. So, given the limited space of the city's downtown area, it is in the city's best interest to allow development to occupy all available space for buildings to maximize economic return to the city. This is currently the case for the C1 Central Business District. However, in the event someone would want to build residential on top of commercial, they would be required to put additional off-street parking to accommodate the residential units. This off-street parking requirement would take up available space for buildings to occupy and would inhibit the economic potential of the lot, just kind of something we just talked about. City staff is proposing to remove the requirement for parking in conjunction with residential units in the Central Business District exclusively. This recommendation would also go before the City Council for final review. So this is verbatim what we'd be scratching out. The Planning Commission's reviewing a policy amendment to remove all off-street parking requirements for Central Business District as written below. So existing, this is current. Required parking spaces, off-street parking spaces, accessory to uses here and after designated shall be provided as follows, except no such spaces shall be required in C1 Central Business District unless for dwelling units permitted in conjunction with business uses. Striking that out. Required parking spaces, off-street parking spaces, accessory to uses here and after designated shall be provided as follows, except no such spaces shall be required in the Central Business District C1. Dwelling units permitted in conjunction with business uses are exempt from these requirements and should not be required to have off-street parking for the C1 district. So it's very exclusive to C1. So that being said, it's the idea, once again, that it allows you to build $50, $60, $70, $100 per square foot for your additional building space instead of having to occupy your lot with $2.80 per square foot. So if people want to park and they want to build residential on top of commercial, kind of like what you see at Strutz, you know, they had to require off-street parking at the time. Strutz built, not Strutz, excuse me, TNT, they built residential units on top of commercial. We forced them to do off-street parking to accommodate that residential. We would prefer if the off-street parking actually parked in Linear Park, parked on Main Street, parked on the side street, parked along those, any parking spots. Because right now we don't actually have a high demand for any parking on our street after 5 o'clock because there's no commercial activity after 5 o'clock. So anybody who wants to park in a residential unit on our central business district, which is only 3 blocks from Santa Fe to 3rd, then they can park on the street. And that's kind of their justification behind it. That being said, in the future, that might cause an issue, but right now, I don't see that being an issue immediately because we don't have a lot of bars, we don't have anything that's going to generate a lot of after-hours activity on our main street, so. Small publication costs of public hearing and ordinance after consideration by City Council, legally approved as a form. It is recommended the Planning Commission have Planning Commission chair open the public hearing, receive comments, close the public hearing, approve the changes to subdivision regulations amending Article 5, parking regulation for the Central Business District.
Alright, we'll open the public hearing.
Very good.
And we'll close the public hearing.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the subdivision regulations amending Article 5 parking regulations for the Central Business District.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Alright.
Very good. This is G, old business, G1, R1 zoning lot width depth modification. So on June 9th, the Planning Commission reviewed the possibility of changing the minimum lot width and depth of the R1 zoning classification. After review, it is decided to table agenda item until the next meeting to give staff time to review the complete zoning classification modification, which would include depth, width, height, lot coverage, setbacks, and acceptable uses. Agenda item F1 showed how all of these changes work together, and the agenda item would modify lot depth and width of the R1 zoning district. This is just going over and covering all the bases, with Planning Commission's view the policy amendment to change the minimum lot size, width, and depth for R1 district. Typical lots in R1 are 75, 80 by 100, and current dimensions for a minimum are 60 by 100 depth, allowed a minimum. Proposed dimensions would be 40 by 100. So, small publication costs for the public hearing and ordinance after consideration by City Council. Legally, it's approved as a form. It is recommended that the Planning Commission approve the changes to subdivision regulations amending the R1 zoning requirements for minimum lot width and depth. And that's as it relates to that one item. So, we had the public hearing. That's why you don't need to open a public hearing and close them today, because we had one on June 9th. So, at this point, just be deliberation.
So explain why.
2 separate items?
Yes.
I like to make you guys frustrated. No, I had 2 separate items, because technically this was a standalone item back on June 9th, and I need to have it as a separate standalone item for today. So, technically I could have rolled it all into F1, but since it was old business, and F1 was introducing brand new items, I had to separate them, if that makes sense, so.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, since you guys had already seen lot width and lot depth, that's an old business item. Since lot coverage, lot setbacks, acceptable uses was a new item, technically you had to open a public hearing for those new items, close the public hearing, and then consider the old business items from June 9th.
Alright, looking for a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the recommended change to the R1 zoning plans, minimum lot width and depth. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Very good, 42, so that item passes. Thank you very much. This is item H, new business, there is none, so this will just go into our staff report. So, I like to give these economic reports just to kind of give you guys an update on how things are looking. But all the yellow bars, or the green yellow bars, That's the year total for the valuation. So every time a building permit's submitted, they're like, this building's gonna be worth $300,000. This one's gonna be worth $250,000. This one's gonna be worth $500,000. And this commercial building over here is $1 million. This one over here is only $400,000. And so we just sum it all together. And so all evaluation for 2019 is right here, and then 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025 year to date. Next to them on the right is going to be the quarters. So obviously the quarters every 3 months, January, February, March, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4 for 2019, and then 2020, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just kind of interesting to look at as you watch these trends of valuation. I think a large part of that, for one, 2024 was a stellar year, just an exceptional amount of valuation, an exceptional amount of building permits that we issued. I think that was a trailing effect of all the plats that you guys approved over the years. I think what you see is that plats will get approved and infrastructure goes in, so there's like this trailing couple of years, and then all of a sudden all the building permits start flying in because all the streets and sewer and water go in. And so you'll be like, oh, 2019 is really high here, but that's mostly probably because of the plats that were approved back in 2017 and et cetera. Here, 2020, everyone got a little bit scared, but there are still plats, so building permits are still coming in, that was kind of interesting too, because I thought everything was going to come to a standstill, but we still had builders coming in without masks and everything. And I'm like, I'm still working, what are you talking about? So I was like, okay, we're processing building permits. So we kept moving forward. 2021 was, obviously, we had a lot of plats in 2019, so that popped up, and then it just kind of does this. And 2024, I mean, we had so many plats come in, and it's just, you know, from the previous years, that all the permits that would come flying, and especially duplex permits, just had a massive amount of them, so the valuation just skyrocketed. We're doing pretty good in 2025 so far. You know, we're a little bit more than halfway through the year, but we're on pace to beat 2020 in terms of valuation. Now, that being said, a valuation could be high, so, for example, you're looking at 2019 and 2020 here, you're like, oh, I bet you there was more permits in 2019 than there was in 2020 based on valuation. Well, not necessarily. We had 56 building permits in 2019 and 94 in 2020. And so you're like, well, how did that happen? Well, we had Genesis submitted their building permits, and that was, you know, $6 million. And then they submitted a separate hotel permit for another $14 million. I think they'll actually invert that. The hotel was 6 and the Genesis was 14. So you had $20 million of valuation dropped in 2019. And so you're like, wow, that was a lot. So that really bumped it up. And then you go back over here, 2020, we had a lot of permits, so that definitely, but we didn't have as much valuation because we had more residential. And then obviously, 2024 was just a stellar year, just a very, very good year. So 156 building permits, brand new development. So it was just a very, very incredible year. But all in all, when you look at 2025, and we have 45, we're just actually on pace to beat 2019 in terms of actual new construction pulled. So even though rates have gone up, we're not seeing a complete stand down in terms of new building. Really, the slowdown has been rain more than anything else. Just been an exceptional amount of rain, so nobody's going to go out there pulling permits when they can't do anything. Because once you pull a permit, you have 6 months to call in your first inspection. So why bother if you're going to have 6 months of rain? So anyway, so we're actually doing pretty well in terms of quarters. Quarter one's obviously a cold quarter, so usually it's pretty slow. But 14 for quarter 1 in 2025, 61 for, like I said, 2024 is abnormal, so we're doing pretty good there. Total fees collected, so we're doing really well in terms of all in all fees. $461,000 worth of fees. Now, and you're like, how can the fees be higher than 2019? You know, you have 45 here and 56 here. You should have more fees in 2019 than you would have in 2025. Well, that's because we've heard some of the complaints about the idea of duplexes and, you know, everything else, and are they paying their fair share? So we've actually doubled the fees requirements for duplexes. So every time you submit a duplex building permit, it's going to cost you about $12,000. Every time you submit a building permit for a single family, it's going to cost you about $6,000. So it's pretty much double for a duplex to build a duplex in terms of the fees we charge you. So that being said, they pay double for caps, double for the community improvement fee. So with the duplexes coming in, and also the single family, we are collecting more fees than we would have in 2019, even though we see less building permits being submitted so far. That is it. I'll move on to item J, Planning Commissioner comments.
Anything from you, sir? No comment.
Must be yourself on that, so.
he had brought up to me about, possibly changing that code and zoning so that when they annex something into the city, it converts to R4. I'm not necessarily in favor of it, but I was curious what you guys thought.
Oh, giving them free rein.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Did you catch that? Okay. Mike, you want to explain that?
No. Just kidding. No, we were floated the idea, so entitlements is the most difficult part for a developer, right? So let's pretend all of you guys are developers now. All of you guys are sitting in the seats. You've reached out to your prospective engineering firms. You've floated the ideas. All those engineering firms reach out to me. I tell them how to get through the process, what it might look like. They're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to go buy the land. I'm going to reach out to that farmer and buy the land. So they go buy the land. So you guys have just bought that land. And now you come to the planning commission and the city council and you're saying, hey, you know, city council, I want to annex. And they're like, okay, you know, why? And they're like, well, I might want to do residential development. Okay, so we'll annex. So the default is R1. So default's R1. And then they go, okay, how am I going to make this work? I need to de-water, maybe. The water table's high. I need to put in retention ponds. That eats up a lot of my land. I need to put in streets, water, sewer, curb and gutter, sidewalks. You know, the planning commission wants me to put a sidewalk on both sides of the street now. Okay, that costs me more money. You know, in terms of specials, I want to keep my specials low. I need to spread the lots. What can I do? Now, since at the time, R1 was not, you know, for it's still not until the city council approves it, of course. If they don't approve it, then it's not going to change. But at the time, R1 was 60 by 100. If they like, I can't do that. I need 50 by 100 to make these work. I need it 50 by 100. Then I'm like, okay, well, here's your options. Rezone. That's your option. So, rezoning. So then they come before planning commission. Maybe planning commission likes it, maybe they don't. Maybe they get torn apart. Who knows? And so then it goes to city council. City council's like, no, I don't like it. Maybe planning commission likes it, city council doesn't. Maybe planning commission doesn't like it, city council does. So the developer, you guys, are like, okay, now I'm stuck. It hasn't been approved. My zoning hasn't been approved. I need to go back to the drawing board. I have this carrying cost of both the money I spent with my 1031 exchange and the carrying cost of paying the taxes on it. And I have to figure out how to make this work. So that's the risk factor. That's the thing that comes up the most, is what's called, you know, risk and entitlements is the riskiest part. Banks, I'm not saying banks are easy to work with. No, you know, I'm not making a knock against Commissioner Hayden or anything like that, but banks are going to have an idea of kind of what they think is their risk tolerance. If you can make the bank comfortable with their risk tolerance, then you can make potentially the project work. But you just don't know, and I always tell that to developers. I can't swear what planning commission or city council is going to say. You know, I can say that this is how you get there. It's subject to whatever they want. And so that's where they go, okay, so that's the biggest risk. So the idea was potentially, there was a question, can we allow developers to buy land and choose what zoning classification that they want to do? And the answer to that is no, that's illegal. So, can't do it the legal way. Okay, so what other options are there? The other option is, why don't you set it as the default when somebody annexes in, instead of R1, you set it to R4. And that gives you the widest range possible to tailor your development to any type of residential type that you would like. It doesn't mean commercial or industrial. Doesn't mean you can put a car sales lot or a gas station. It just means if you want to do anything from apartments and condos down to single family, that gives you that option. So
That's only on annex land,
only on annexed land.
not new development.
Yeah, so if there's land in Goddard, it's already been annexed, and it's R1, you'd have to go through zoning to change that.
You're
That's
not
the
thinking
idea.
annexing major portions of land here, are we?
Well, we're always, that's one of the questions that come up, is like, well, how often are rezonings annexed land? It's like, probably like 80% of them are annexed land, so that's a big thing. So if a developer says, hey, I'm coming from Texas, and I have, like we have some Texas developers, I have $50 million that I, have a 1031 exchange, and I want to pay capital gains tax on it, I want to buy land in Goddard, and I want to build duplexes and triplexes and row homes and patio homes and single family. I want to do this mix, and maybe I want to do this, this, and this. R4 would allow you to do that without getting excoriated from county residents. So that was the rationale.
If it did get approved and they came in as R4, and then somebody who already owned land came to us and said, hey, I'm at R1, and you're letting any new land come into R4, well, why can't mine be R4? I think it'd be really hard to say no to them. It'd be like they'd be at a disadvantage just because they own land that was already in Goddard and not be annexed. I guess that's the hesitation I see is just that it would be hard, and if that's the case, then what's the use of the zones at all here? I just think I personally have a hard time saying no to somebody who, just because they already own land. If this was a change that was made, to tell anybody else that no, just because you already owned it before the change, you're not eligible. But I'm glad you brought this up, because I was kind of wondering the same thing, and I'm the new guy here, so I was just kind of really eager to hear what everybody else thought about it.
Well, I don't like when it goes back and forth through the city council and then just want to go facilitate. Basically, just so it's done. We've had that happen. It seems like there's a big waste of time. But I like the checks and balances. I don't know that I'm going to give up the checks and balances and just say, well, they're in an RB1.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to I only knew my opinion, so I want to hear what you're going to do.
I don't agree with the R4. They want to put different things in, they need to come and present them.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna say again what I said before. I don't believe a developer is gonna walk in here and propose something they don't think is gonna make them money. I don't think a developer is gonna walk in here and do a whatever duplex development or whatever, because I mean they're tracking the market. They're putting out a product they believe is gonna sell. And I think it's a waste of resource, both for them personally as well as government resource to do the back and forth game of, you know, come in, get it rezoned, go back 30 days, come back, get it approved, go to the city council process, go through all that. When in the end, it's all going to be the same anyway. It's going to end up being an R4 duplex or whatever the end result is going to be. If they think a single family residential development's going to win, that's what they're going to propose.
But it's supposed to be in the beginning, it was supposed to build affordable housing. But I don't think there's any such thing as affordable housing anymore.
Well, not without an R4 option, right?
But still, even if it's a duplex, the only affordable housing would be an apartment complex.
Okay. So what's wrong with that? I mean, let them build it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's what I'm saying. If that's the best option for the market, let them do it. They're the ones investing the millions of dollars.
It's their money, they're investing.
Right. And I just, again, my fundamental assumption is they're doing it out of the best interest of their business.
Yeah.
Like, my perspective on that is similar to Ryan's, other than the fact that the city does have somewhat of a plan, and we do have limited land available currently inside the city limits, so much of what we do moving forward will be annexed. And if we want to have any sort of vision as to where things go, I struggle giving them the freedom just to buy land and put what they want there if that doesn't necessarily meet the vision of the city. That's where I struggle. I like to hear about the projects. I'm not opposed to the development of the city by any means, but I do struggle with the
Free rent.
the lack of checks and balances that an R4 might offer. That's kind of where I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very well said.
I think the risk we have to assess is what are the surrounding cities going to do?
Yeah, sure.
Right. I mean, and we're going to have to balance that, because there's nothing stopping Wichita coming around and annexing it
Yeah.
themselves. And now we're landlocked.
And
So again, it's
and that's a hypothetical investor who's got that money. If he sees us, well, I could buy it here at Goddard, and maybe I could change it, or I can go right next door and not have to worry about it. That's where we'll go.
Right.
do you know what the county, you know, if you do buy land, I mean, if buy land just north of here and it's in county jurisdiction, what is that? How does, do you know what the county zoning is?
No, I would guess it's rural residential as a default, but I couldn't tell you, I mean,
But it's gonna, I mean, if it's county land and they buy it, it's gonna stay zoned at whatever they buy it at.
I believe so,
At
yeah.
that point in time.
Yeah.
The only time it would change is if it was annexed into a city.
Municipality.
Right, so
Mhm.
either Wichita, Goddard.
Yeah, so the county's got the zones and zoning classifications, and so really if it was gonna go to rural residential, it would have to be de-annexed from the city, and I don't know if that's their default, but we rarely gonna see a city de-annex land unless it was filed in a lawsuit, you know, we could, Board of County Commissioners has certain authority to force us to de-annex if we fail to provide services to property owners that we've annexed, you know, that type of thing, but I don't know what the default for a lot of cities are, and I was starting to do that, look into that a little bit more, but I would imagine a lot of the zoning and subdivision regulations are kind of copy-paste. You would see that a lot, so I'm guessing for most cities, it's gonna be the most restrictive, just like ours, you know, it's gonna be R1 or R1A or whatever the equivalent is for these cities, R1B, you know, so I'm guessing that's for a lot of them. Now, how easy it is to get it rezoned in those cities really depends on the city, you know, that's the risk factor. Now, Wichita's broken into districts, so if the district representative says I'm okay with it, chances are city council's just gonna approve it once it goes through, so, but every city's a little bit different. If this is something you guys want to discuss in more depth, then we can always present it at a later planning commission meeting if you want to, as a formal agenda item. You know, if you want to discuss it during a joint workshop with city council, it's always an opportunity, and we have a new council member that you guys have yet to meet, her name is Naomi. You know, we have, 2 seats are coming open on city council right now, and, so you may see at least one additional council member maybe in the new year as well, so. Do you guys want to discuss this anymore?
Answer your question?
Yes, appreciate the feedback.
Okay.
Alright.
Well, next meeting will be August 11th at 7 p.m.
Second.
You first.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, meeting adjourned.